10 years after I stood in for my brother at his own wedding, he suddenly came back. The whole family stared at him in dead silence. He yawned, stretching lazily as he spoke. 13 countries. Man, I am exhausted. Where's Lily? She must be in elementary school by now. Why isn't she here to greet her real dad? Lily is my brother's daughter. 10 years ago, he suddenly announced he had a child. Then, on the day of his wedding, he faked his own death, abandoning both his newborn daughter and his fiancée. The Vance family is New York old money royalty. My parents didn't dare offend them. Desperate, they practically gift-wrapped me, a fresh college graduate, and shipped me off to the altar. For the past 10 years, I've been a devoted husband and a loving father. Now, watching my brother act like he owned the place. My parents turned their hesitant eyes toward me. I just smiled faintly. Lily and her mother are on vacation in the Bahamas. Hearing this, Julian frowned, his face twisting in annoyance. Didn't I tell you guys I was coming home? Didn't you tell Audrey I'd be back? I calmly took a sip of my coffee. 10 years of navigating the business world had changed me. I was no longer the invisible, quiet kid living in my brother's shadow. My silence pushed Julian over the edge. He slammed his hand on the table and stood up, his voice screeching. Ethan. What is that supposed to mean? Don't forget, I was the one betrothed to the Vance family. Now that I'm back, did you really think you could keep playing the wealthy son-in-law? I glanced up at him and chuckled. Julian, I have no idea what you're talking about. My wife and I are doing great. Over the years, I had accompanied Audrey Vance to countless charity galas and high society events. We were known as the golden couple of New York's elite. Audrey's image as a devoted family woman had earned her massive respect, and lucrative deals, from her business partners. Maybe there was no burning romance between Audrey and me, but we shared something far stronger than love. Leverage. Mutual benefit. And that was exactly why I was so confident. Julian looked at me in disbelief. He pointed a trembling finger at my face. Ethan. Have you no shame? Audrey was supposed to be mine. I set my coffee cup down and replied calmly, with absolute dignity. No. Audrey and I are legally married. My gaze was firm. I stood up, completely done with the circus. Our parents stood by, looking utterly helpless. Julian lunged forward, grabbing our mother's arm. Mom. He's insane. Audrey and I were together all through college. If it weren't for my connection to the Vances, how could our family business have grown this big? My parents had always favored Julian. But this time, Mom stole a glance at my cold expression before mumbling in a weak voice. But, you ran away, Julian. You even faked your own death. We didn't hear a single word from you for 10 years. There was no groom at the altar. If Ethan hadn't stepped in, the Vance family would have been humiliated. They would have ruined us, and our company would have gone bankrupt. Julian froze for a split second, stammering to defend himself. I just wasn't ready for marriage back then. But I'm back now, aren't I? Besides, you know how arrogant the Vances are. They always look down on our family. If I had married into their family back then, I would have been treated like a dog. I would have been humiliated every day. My eyes grew cold as I asked, then why are you back now? Julian answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Because the Vances have accepted you now. That means they'll accept me too. It's perfect. I'll take over as Audrey's husband. I'm sure they won't treat me too badly now. Lily can finally be with her real dad. It's a win-win for everyone. With that, he took a few steps forward and grabbed my hands, looking at me with forced sincerity. Ethan, you're free. You can finally go and find your own happiness. I stared blankly into his eyes. Those clear eyes carried the absolute, cruel naivety of a child who had been spoiled his entire life. A naivety that was sickening. He genuinely believed that I, the neglected younger brother, was born to sacrifice myself for him. With a cold laugh, I yanked my hands away. I'm perfectly happy with my life, Julian. You're the one who needs a reality check. I turned and walked out of that heartless house. I didn't care what Julian was feeling behind my back. It couldn't be anything good. But I knew his stubborn, petulant nature all too well. He wouldn't give up easily. Exhausted, I drove back to the Vance estate. Lately, I had been buried in corporate projects, working late into the night almost every day. As I walked through the door, I massaged my aching temples. An hour ago, when my parents texted me on Snapchat that my brother was back, my entire body had frozen. I always knew this day might come, but when it actually did, it still caught me off guard. I hung my briefcase on the rack and spotted a pair of high heels on the floor. I blinked, quickly forcing my usual polite, perfect smile onto my face. You're back, a warm voice called out. I turned around. Audrey was wearing a black lace nightgown. Even in simple sleepwear, her stunning curves, porcelain skin, and flawless features were captivating. A gentle smile played on her lips. She frowned slightly, concern washing over her face. Why do you look so exhausted? Haven't you been sleeping? I smiled. Just too many things at the office. Did you have fun on your trip? How is Lily? Audrey walked over and slid into my arms. She pressed her face against my chest, her slender fingers gently tracing my back as she whispered. Lily loved it. She was so tired she fell asleep immediately. The only pity was that you weren't there. Next time, we'll go as a family of 3. I missed you, she murmured, her voice laced with intimacy. I kissed her soft hair, but my heart felt as cold as ice. When her soft lips pressed against mine, my body stiffened. My mind was completely flooded with the venomous words Julian had said to me earlier. For the first time, I didn't kiss her back. Instead, I gently pushed her back, creating a small distance between us. I stopped mid-sentence because I felt Audrey's body freeze. My sharp instincts told me she was unhappy. After a long, tense silence, Audrey smiled, finding an excuse for me. You're just too tired. Go take a shower and get some sleep. She saved us from the awkwardness. With that, she gave me a quick peck on the cheek and let me go. I nodded and headed upstairs. Behind me, standing in the shadows, Audrey's expression darkened. The warmth drained from her face as her sharp gaze locked onto my retreating back. The next morning, I drove out of the estate to head to work. Right outside the residential gates, a familiar figure blocked my path. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Julian saw my car. He ran straight into the middle of the road, forcing me to slam on the brakes. The cars behind me honked furiously. It was morning rush hour. The neighborhood security guards rushed over, trying to pull Julian away. But Julian fought them off, screaming at the top of his lungs. Ethan! Stop hiding in your car. You stole my woman. Have you no shame? His screeching voice drew the attention of everyone nearby. I pulled my car over to make sure I wasn't blocking the gate, then got out. I glared at him. Julian offered a smug smile, running a hand through his messy hair. He sneered, what? Embarrassed? Or are you afraid Audrey will dump you once she knows I'm back? My voice was like ice. Julian, you are harassing me. This is my final warning. Stay away from me. Julian didn't take my warning seriously at all. Instead, his smile turned triumphant. Stop acting. You're terrified. You've lived in my shadow your whole life, Ethan. It's only natural that you'd be jealous of me and try to steal my life. He took a few steps closer, leaning in to whisper in my ear. Too bad a parasite always gets thrown out in the end. I'll wait right here. When I see Audrey, I'll explain everything. She'll take me back. And Lily? She's my daughter. We share the same blood. You'll never be her real father. Without a word, I got back into my car and drove off. This time, Julian didn't block me. In the rearview mirror, I could see him smiling as my car sped away. A chill ran down my spine. Julian had been spoiled since childhood. He had no boundaries. Whenever things didn't go his way, he threw tantrums like a giant toddler. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Over the past 10 years, I had poured my heart and soul into this marriage and my career. If we divorced, both Audrey and I would suffer massive financial and reputational losses. Audrey had a family empire to fall back on. But I only had myself. Sitting in my office, my mind drifted to the past. Back in elementary school, Julian spent every break playing basketball, never touching his homework. Afraid of the teacher's wrath, he would take my completed assignments and put his name on them. My parents always justified it. They said I was a straight-A student, so the teachers wouldn't mind if I forgot my homework. But Julian was different. If he didn't hand it in, the teachers would scold him in front of the whole class. A boy's pride was everything, they said. So, to save Julian's pride, my hard work was routinely stolen. Eventually, I learned to write 2 copies of every assignment just to keep the peace. In high school, Julian was the popular kid. He chased the prettiest girls, got into fights, and charmed his teachers. Even though his grades were terrible, his outgoing personality earned him tons of friends. His entire life, someone had always been there to clean up his messes. Meanwhile, I had to walk on eggshells, calculating every single step. In college, he met Audrey Vance at a music festival. They formed an indie rock band and played in local bars. For 2 months, while I was working 3 part-time jobs just to afford my tuition, they were living out their wild youth on stage. I thought that once I graduated, I would save enough money to escape my toxic family forever. Until one night, Julian stumbled home late, reeking of alcohol. My parents stayed up to make him soup and undressed him. The whole house revolved around him. But then, a drunken Julian dropped a bomb that shocked everyone. He was going to be a father. For weeks, a suffocating silence hung over the house. My parents were in a frenzy over the sudden scandal. I was busy working my summer jobs to save for my final year of tuition. The only relaxed person in the house was Julian. He had absolutely no concept of what being a father meant. To cover up the scandal, my parents kept him locked in the house. Meanwhile, our family negotiated a marriage alliance with the Vances. They agreed to hold the wedding after a paternity test proved the child was Julian's. Everything was set. The Vances had reluctantly accepted the arrangement. After all, if the scandal leaked, the Vance family name would be dragged through the mud, and their stock prices would plunge. The night before the wedding, I took a 4-hour train ride home to attend. But the next morning, Julian vanished. The bridal suite was left with nothing but baby Lily in her crib and a room full of furious Vances. Audrey's face was dark, while my parents stood trembling in the corner. Then, their eyes slowly drifted to me. My mother grabbed me as if I were a lifeline. "We have another son. He's never even been in a relationship. We'll give him to you to make up for this." My father immediately chimed in. "Yes. Ethan. Hurry. Your brother is gone. You have to take his place." I stood frozen, my mind unable to process their words. Before I could speak, my parents grabbed my arms, trying to drag me into the dressing room to force me into a tuxedo. I struggled against them, my heart sinking into a bottomless abyss. Anger and disbelief clashed violently inside me. I had lived the first 20 years of my life in Julian's shadow. Now, they wanted me to sacrifice the rest of my life for him too. The sheer injustice of it made my throat tight. For the first time in my life, I snapped. I screamed and yanked my hands free. Why? Why do I have to pay for his selfishness? This is his mess, not mine. My father's hand flew across my face, delivering a vicious slap. "Julian is your family." I stumbled back, my cheek burning with pain. My mother sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "What Julian did was terrible, I know. But you can't just watch our family get ruined. The guests are already waiting in the chapel." My face went pale. I forced the words out through grit teeth. "I am not getting married." No matter how much they begged or tried to push me, I refused to budge. I grabbed a fruit knife from the table, pressed the blade against my neck, and hissed with bloodshot eyes. "If anyone forces me, I'll end it right here." At that, everyone froze. I didn't care if they were worried about my life or just terrified of the legal mess a suicide would cause. It didn't matter. I had already graduated. Once I got a job, my freedom would be absolute. The room fell into a tense standoff. Finally, Audrey suggested we speak in private. Everyone was ushered out of the room. In the dressing suite, only Audrey and I remained. 30 minutes later. The doors opened. I walked out in a tailored tuxedo, placing my hand flatly in Audrey's. With a smile that looked more painful than crying, I got married. My thoughts snapped back to the present. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my high-rise office, looking down at the city. It had taken me 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears to earn this office. Just as a sudden chill washed over me, a pair of arms wrapped around my waist from behind. I flinched slightly, but the sweet scent of cherry blossoms immediately put me at ease. "What are you thinking so hard about?" "You didn't even hear me walk in," a soft voice whispered in my ear. I smiled. "Just preparing for the business gala tomorrow." Audrey took my hand, looking up at me with a smile. "I believe in you, Ethan. Your capability is unquestionable." The corners of my lips curved upward. "Why did you come by the office? Isn't the headquarters busy?" "It's fine. I wanted to drive you home. Also, Lily mentioned she wants to see that new movie tomorrow." I nodded absent-mindedly. Audrey leaned up and pressed her lips to mine. I gently ruffled her hair. When we got home that night, there was no sign of Julian. He was surprisingly quiet. I figured my parents had locked him in his room to protect their own business interests. Just like they did years ago. I was physically and mentally drained. The moment my head hit the pillow, I fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, a warm, soft body wrapped tightly around me from behind. The next evening, the grand hall of the annual business gala was packed with elite guests mingling with champagne glasses in hand. After doing my rounds of socializing, I took a quick break and headed to the VIP lounge. Lily was sitting obediently on the plush sofa, waiting for me. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Are we still going to the movies after this, Daddy?" I smiled warmly, gently tapping her nose. "Of course. Have we ever broken a promise to you?" Lily giggled happily. Seeing her smile eased some of the tension in my chest. Still, since the start of the gala, I had been plagued by an uneasy feeling. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy doors of the ballroom. As I scanned the crowd, my eyes locked onto a familiar figure, and my entire body stiffened. Not far away, Julian was holding Audrey's arm, speaking to her urgently. Audrey had her back to me, so I couldn't see her expression. A second later, Julian spotted me. He pointed a finger at me, his face twisting into a hideous snarl. "I'm your real husband, Audrey. He's a shameless thief who stole you and our daughter." In an instant, every eye in the ballroom turned to me. The glass chandelier overhead threw shards of fractured, amber light across the parquet floor of the Pierre Hotel ballroom. Around us, 200 of Manhattan's most insulated elite went completely silent. The quartet in the corner trailed off mid-measure, the cellist's bow hovering above the strings. Like an executioner's blade. Julian's hand was still clamped around Audrey's bare forearm, his knuckles pale against her slate-gray silk gown. His eyes were wide, manic with the sudden rush of an audience. He smelled faintly of stale cologne and sour sweat, the kind of sweat that comes from pacing an alleyway in a cheap off-the-rack blazer while waiting for security doors to open. Audrey, Julian hissed again, louder this time, his voice bouncing off the gilded crown molding. Look at him. He's wearing my clothes, living in your house, raising my kid. He's a counterfeit. Nobody moved. Whispers began to bubble through the room like champagne fizzing in a flute. Across the room, I caught sight of Mrs. Kensington, the chair of the Metropolitan Museum Arts Council, tilting her chin toward her husband, her eyes gleaming with the predatory delight reserved exclusively for high society. Scandal. I didn't rush forward. I didn't raise my voice. 10 years of boardrooms, hostile takeovers, and Vance family shareholder meetings had taught me one fundamental law of power: the person who raises their voice first has already surrendered the room. I took 2 slow, measured steps forward. The soles of my Oxford shoes clicked softly against the wood. My eyes never left Audrey. Audrey didn't pull away with a scream. She didn't gasp. Her posture remained impossibly straight, the column of her neck elegant, the diamond and emerald choker at her throat catching the light without a single tremor. Slowly, deliberately, Audrey turned her head. Her dark eyes swept over Julian's face, not with shock, not with nostalgic tenderness, but with the cold, assessing detachment one might reserve for a smudge of grease on an otherwise clean marble floor. Julian, she said. Her voice was moderate, pitched low, yet it carried across the dead silence of the hall. Take your hand off me before the hotel guards break your wrist. Julian blinked, thrown off script. Audrey, it's me. I'm back. I had to go, you know how stifling everything was back then. But I'm ready now. We can fix this. Julian, Audrey interrupted, her voice dropping another octave, smooth as glass. And just as sharp. I do not know what kind of cheap melodrama you have constructed in your head over the last decade. But if you touch my person again, you will be leaving this building in an ambulance. Julian's grip slacked. In that fraction of a second, 2 Vance Group private security officers, stationed discreetly at the perimeter of the ballroom, stepped out from behind the velvet curtains. They didn't run, they moved with the quiet, terrifying efficiency of men who were paid 6 figures a year to eliminate embarrassments. Before Julian could raise his arm to point at me again, Marcus, our head of security, stepped between him and Audrey. With a subtle, practiced maneuver, Marcus gripped Julian's elbow, twisting it behind his back with enough pressure to force Julian onto his tiptoes without making a spectacle of it. Sir, Marcus murmured into Julian's ear, the service exit is this way. Let go of me. Ethan. Tell them. Julian thrusted his chin forward, his face flushed purple. Mom and Dad told me you wouldn't do this. You're living a lie. Ethan. You're nothing without me. Audrey, tell him. Tell everyone whose bed you were supposed to be in. A low murmur rippled through the onlookers. I stopped 3 feet from Audrey. I reached into my breast pocket, pulled out a monogrammed linen handkerchief, and offered it to my wife. Are you all right? I asked softly. Audrey took the handkerchief. Instead of dabbing at her brow or checking her dress, she carefully wiped the spot on her forearm where Julian's fingers had rested, as if removing a contaminant. Then, she looked directly at me. The icy mask that usually shielded her in public softened into something deep, deliberate, and undeniably real. I'm fine, she said, loud enough for every eager ear within 20 feet to register. She slipped her arm through mine, her fingers interlacing with my own. Her touch was warm, steady, and unyielding. Just tired of uninvited pests crashing our foundation's dinner. She turned back to Marcus, who was already dragging a struggling Julian toward the double doors. Marcus, Audrey added casually, ensure the police are waiting at the curb. File a report for trespassing, disorderly conduct, and harassment. If any press outside gets a camera within 10 feet of him, make sure the Vance legal team has injunctions filed before midnight. Understood, Mrs. Vance, Marcus replied, shoving Julian through the side doors. The heavy oak slammed shut, cutting off Julian's final, frantic shout. The silence lingered for half a beat longer. I turned to the room, raised my champagne glass slightly, and smiled. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice steady, resonant, and calm. It seems some old family acquaintances still struggle with boundaries. Let's not allow bad manners to ruin the Metropolitan Children's Foundation. Maestro, please continue. The cellist caught my cue, the strings swelled back into a lively Vivaldi concerto, and the murmur of conversation resumed, tentative at first, then gaining volume as the crowd rushed to pretend they hadn't just witnessed the heir apparent of the city nearly get tackled. Audrey leaned closer to me, her lips brushing my ear in a posture that looked like whispered affection to anyone watching from across the room. "Where is Lily?" she asked under her breath. "In the VIP lounge," I replied, keeping my eyes fixed on the crowd. "With her tablet and headphones." "She didn't hear a thing." "Good." Audrey's hand tightened around mine, her nails pressing lightly into my palm. "Let's finish this dinner. We have things to settle tonight." We left the gala 45 minutes early. In the back seat of the Maybach, Lily fell asleep almost immediately, her head resting on my lap. Her small hand remained curled inside my coat pocket, clutching the plastic movie tickets I had promised we'd use this weekend. I looked down at her features. The high bridge of her nose, the slight curve of her jaw, there were traces of my family's genetics in her, certainly. But where? Julian's face had always been softened by laziness and easy indulgence. Lily had Audrey's sharp, observant eyes and the quiet discipline I had spent 10 years instilling in her. She had had a high fever when she was 3. I was the one who spent 72 consecutive hours in the pediatric ward of Mount Sinai, cooling her forehead with damp cloths while Audrey was in London negotiating the Van Summers merger. When she lost her first tooth at age 6, I was the one who hid a silver dollar under her pillow and wrote a letter in tiny, looping fairy cursive. When she fell off her horse at the Hamptons estate 2 summers ago, she didn't scream for a biological father who was lounging on a beach in Phuket. She clung to my neck, crying, "Daddy, Daddy, it hurts," until the doctor finished the stitches. Blood is an accident of biology. Fatherhood is a craft carved out of 10,000 quiet, exhausting mornings. Audrey sat beside me, staring out the tinted window as the lights of the FDR drive blurred past in a smear of red and white. She hadn't said a word since we left the hotel. When the car pulled into the driveway of our estate in Greenwich, the iron gates swung open smoothly. The gravel crunched beneath the heavy tires. I carried Lily upstairs to her bedroom, took off her patent leather shoes, and tucked her under the heavy down comforter. I kissed her forehead. "Daddy," she mumbled, her eyes half opening in the dim glow of the nightlight. "Go to sleep, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm right here." "Are we still going to the movies?" "Saturday afternoon. Just you and me." "I promise." She smiled, sighed softly, and rolled over, drifting back into sleep. I closed her door with a quiet click and walked down the hallway to the master suite. Audrey was already inside. The heavy oak doors of the private study connected to our bedroom were wide open. She had kicked off her heels and changed into a dark silk robe, standing by the antique mahogany bar with a crystal tumbler of scotch in her hand. She didn't pour one for me. She knew I didn't drink hard liquor after 9. "Your parents let him in," she said without turning around. I stopped at the edge of the Persian rug. I assumed as much. Audrey turned. The amber liquid in her glass caught the soft lamplight. Her face was completely devoid of the polite warmth she presented to the world. This was Audrey Vance, the CEO, the woman who had restructured a century-old conglomerate and cut out 30% of deadweight executive fat before her 30th birthday. "Your father called the event coordinator this morning," Audrey continued evenly. "He claimed there was an extra Vance family guest from overseas who needed a VIP pass added to the registry. The coordinator saw the family name and didn't dare question it." I felt a bitter, cold chuckle rise in my chest. 10 years. 10 years of funding. Their retirement, restructuring their failing auto parts distribution company, quietly subsidizing their mortgage, and the moment their golden boy whistles from the gutter, they open the front door for him. Audrey took a slow sip of her scotch. "They think Julian is their winning lottery ticket. They think if Julian returns, he will take your seat, resume the original engagement, and bring the Vance family assets under their direct control. Julian is an idiot," I said flatly. "And my parents are delusional." Audrey set her glass down with a heavy clink on the marble surface. She walked across the room, stopping directly in front of me. She looked up into my eyes. Her gaze intense, probing, searching for something she hadn't seen in a long time. "Yesterday," she said, her voice dropping, "when I came to your office. When we came home last night. You flinched when I touched you, Ethan." The air in the room grew thick. I didn't flinch, I lied. "Don't lie to me. We haven't lied to each other in 10 years. Audrey stepped closer, her hand rising to touch my lapel. "You thought that the moment Julian walked back into New York, I would look at you and see a substitute." I didn't answer. The silence hung between us, heavy with 10 years of unspoken history. My mind raced back to that sweltering June morning 10 years ago. The bridal suite at the Plaza Hotel had smelled of white lilies and panic. My father's handprint was still burning red against my left cheek. Julian's Handwritten note, a scribbled two-liner on hotel stationery saying he wasn't meant for a cage, was crushed on the floor like trash. Baby Lily was crying in her bassinet. My mother was weeping into a silk scarf. And the Vance family patriarchs were already on their phones with corporate lawyers, calculating the catastrophic plunge of Vance Enterprises stock if the high-profile wedding was called off amidst an illegitimate birth scandal. I had held a fruit knife against my throat, my vision swimming with rage, screaming that I would rather bleed out on their imported carpets than be their sacrifice. Then, Audrey had stepped in. Everyone out, she had commanded. Her voice was only 22 back then, but it had the authority of an empress. When the heavy doors closed, it was just me, the knife, and the bride in her $300,000 Vera Wang gown. She hadn't cried. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but there were no tears on her cheeks. She walked over to the dressing table, picked up a cigarette from a silver case, lit it, and blew a thin stream of smoke toward the ceiling. Put the knife down, Ethan, she had said calmly. You're too smart to die for Julian's stupidity. I am not marrying you, I had panted, the steel edge still pressing into the flesh of my neck. I don't care about your family's reputation. I don't care about my parents' company. I worked 3 jobs to get my degree. I have an offer at an investment firm in Chicago. I am leaving this city today. Audrey had walked over, completely unafraid of the blade. She stopped inches from me, reached out with 2 fingers, and slowly pushed the knife away from my neck. You go to Chicago, Audrey said softly, and you'll spend 15 years clawing your way up from junior analyst to middle management. You'll make $200,000 a year, marry some nice girl from the suburbs, and spend the rest of your life watching your parents send Julian whatever money they have left until they bankrupt themselves. It's better than being a puppet in your gilded cage, I spat. Who said anything about a puppet? Audrey tilted her head. Do you think I actually loved Julian? I froze. Audrey let out a short, mocking laugh. Julian is a pretty boy with good hair. And no spine. He was fun at a music festival when I was 20. He was an act of rebellion against my grandfather. But when I got pregnant, he panicked. He wanted me to get an abortion in a back alley clinic because he was terrified my father would cut off his access to our circles. She threw her cigarette into an empty crystal glass. I kept Lily because she is mine, Audrey said, her eyes burning with fierce, cold ambition. The Vance family board will not allow a single mother to take over the CEO seat. They want stability. They want a traditional family facade. Julian proved he is a coward. But you have worked for every single dollar you've ever held. You have discipline. You have rage. She held out her hand to me. Marry me, Ethan. Not as Julian's replacement. As my partner. We sign a private post-nuptial agreement. In exchange for 5 years of maintaining this marriage and raising Lily with me, I will give you full authority over Vance Capital's logistics and tech portfolio. I will give you capital, connections, and leverage. That would take you 4 lifetimes to build on your own. And if I refuse? Then walk out that door, Audrey had said without hesitation. Your family will collapse by Friday. My family will weather the storm, though it will cost us millions. But you will spend the rest of your life knowing that when the greatest door of opportunity swung open, you ran away because of your brother's shadow. I looked at the weeping baby in the crib. I looked at the bride who didn't want a lover, but an ally. I set the knife on the table. 10 years, I said hoarsely. Not 5. And 50% of the voting shares in the logistics subsidiary we build. Audrey had smiled, a real, brilliant, lethal smile. Deal. Standing in our Greenwich study 10 years later, Audrey looked at me, her dark eyes reflecting the quiet amber of the room. You remember what we agreed to, Audrey whispered. Every word, I replied. Then why did you push me away last night? I walked over to the desk, running my fingers along the polished edge. Because Julian came back believing that everything in this house, the company, the daughter, the wife, was merely on loan to me. And for a second, I wondered if part of you still remembered the boy from the music festival. Audrey let out a sharp, incredulous breath. She crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed the lapels of my jacket, and pulled me down toward her. Ethan Vance, she said fiercely, using the surname I had legally hyphenated onto mine 5 years ago. Julian is a pathetic ghost from a past I despise. For 10 years, you have built our empire. You sat beside me when my grandfather died. You restructured the supply chain that saved this company during the market collapse. You tucked our daughter into bed every single night while he was spending whatever handouts your mother wired him on cheap rum in Southeast Asia. Her lips found mine. It wasn't the polite, measured kiss we gave each other in front of the cameras. At charity galas. It was fierce, hungry, and full of the violent possessiveness that had kept us bound together through a decade of corporate warfare. When she pulled back, her breath was warm against my lips. He wants a war. Audrey whispered, her eyes shining with cold excitement. Let's give him one. But we don't just kick him out, Ethan. We finish this so completely that your parents will never dare mention his name in our presence again. Julian did not go quietly into the night. By 9 o'clock the following morning, my phone was blowing up with alerts from our corporate PR team. Julian had gone straight to the tabloids. A second-tier celebrity gossip outlet had published an exclusive, the true Vance heir returns, secret brother swapped at the altar 10 years ago. The article was filled with dramatic, half-true details, how Julian had supposedly been sent away under mysterious circumstances, how I had stepped in to take his bride, and how the Vance family was harboring a stolen child. Accompanying the article was an old photograph of Julian and Audrey from their college band days, juxtaposed with a grainy picture of Julian standing outside our Greenwich estate gates yesterday morning. At 9:30 a.m., my assistant walked into my office at Vance Capital headquarters. Her face pale. Mr. Vance, your parents are downstairs in the lobby. They've brought security with them, well, not their security, but a couple of private attorneys. And Julian is with them. I swiveled my chair toward the panoramic view of the Hudson River. The morning sun was reflecting brightly off the water. Did they bring press? I asked calmly. 2 freelance photographers are lingering outside the revolving doors. Notify building security to let only my parents and Julian upstairs to the 40th floor conference room. Tell the lawyers and photographers that if they step foot past the lobby turnstiles, they will be arrested for commercial trespassing. Right away, sir. I picked up the landline and dialed Audrey's direct extension at the main tower. They're downstairs, I said when she picked up. I saw the tabloid piece, Audrey replied. Her voice was pure ice. Our legal team has already served the publisher with a $50 million defamation suit. The article will be pulled within an hour. Come to conference room B, I said. Let's end this today. 10 minutes later, the heavy frosted glass doors of conference room B opened. My father walked in first. At 68, his hair was entirely gray, his suit expensive but slightly dated. Behind him was my mother, clutching a designer handbag I had bought her for Mother's Day 3 years ago, her eyes darting nervously around the sprawling, high-tech boardroom. And then came Julian. He was wearing a brand new Italian wool suit, undoubtedly charged to my father's corporate credit card this morning. His hair was slicked back, trying desperately to mimic the look of a Manhattan executive, but his slouch and the arrogant smirk on his face gave him away immediately. Nice office, little brother, Julian sneered, pulling out one of the ergonomic leather chairs at the head of the mahogany table and slumping into it. Looks like you've been spending my family's money well. I remained standing by the window, my hands resting casually in my pockets. Sit down, Dad. Mom, I said quietly. My mother took a hesitant seat, while my father stood stiffly beside Julian, clearing his throat with self-important gravity. Ethan, my father began, his voice carrying that familiar, authoritarian tone he had used on me since childhood. We need to talk about this situation. Reasonably. What happened at the gala last night was an embarrassment. Having Julian arrested was unacceptable. He was trespassing, Dad, I replied. And attempting to assault Audrey. Assault? Julian laughed loudly, leaning back with his hands behind his head. I was touching my fiancée. Audrey and I had a life before you stole it. You were just the babysitter, Ethan. The substitute teacher. Now the real professor is back, and you need to pack your desk. I looked at my mother. Is this what you think too, Mom? My mother's lip trembled. She looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. Ethan, you have to understand, she whispered. Julian was always meant to be the one. The Vances chose Julian first. We only sent you because there was no other choice. You've had 10 years of luxury, darling. You've made so much money. You can start your own company anywhere. But Lily needs her real father. A child shouldn't be kept from her flesh and blood. Her flesh and blood? The boardroom door clicked open. Audrey walked in, holding a slim manila folder under her arm. She didn't look at my parents. She didn't look at Julian. She walked straight to the center of the table, pulled out a chair next to mine, and sat down with fluid grace. Julian's eyes lit up instantly. He sat forward, putting on his most charming, boyish smile, the same smile that had gotten him out of speeding tickets and bar fights in his 20s. Audrey, Julian purred, softening his voice. I knew you'd come. Look, I know. You were angry last night, and you had every right to be. But we can put this behind us. The media is already talking. The public wants us back together. We can file for a quiet annulment with Ethan, give him a handsome severance, and Audrey tossed the manila folder across the polished table. It slid smoothly, stopping directly in front of Julian's chest. Open it, Audrey said flatly. Julian frowned, glancing at my father before pulling open the folder. Inside were bank records, passport scans, and police reports printed on official Interpol letterhead. Julian's face went dead white. What is this? Julian stammered, his fingers trembling as he turned the pages. That, Audrey said, leaning forward and resting her chin on her hands, is the chronicle of your exhausting 13-country tour. She turned her sharp gaze to my parents. Did Julian tell you why he ran away 10 years ago? Did he tell you he faked his death because he had accumulated $800,000 in illegal gambling debts to a loan shark syndicate operating out of Queens? My mother gasped, looking at Julian. Julian? No. You said you had an artistic crisis. You said you needed to find yourself. He found himself at poker tables in Macau, casinos in Monaco, and luxury resorts in Bali, Audrey continued ruthlessly. And when he ran out of money 3 years ago, he forged corporate documents using the Vance name to secure loans from private lenders in Singapore. Audrey smiled, a cold, terrifying baring of teeth. Those lenders tracked the fraud back to Vance Group headquarters 6 months ago. My investigators have been monitoring your precious golden boy since November. We know every penny he owes. We know the forged signatures. And we know he only came back to New York because his passport was flagged and his creditors gave him until the end of the month to pay up or end up in a ditch. That's a lie. Julian shrieked, slamming his hands on the table and knocking his chair back. She's framing me. Mom, she's framing me so she doesn't have to admit she still loves me. Shut up, Julian, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but the sheer, icy authority in it cut through the room like a razor. Julian choked on his words, freezing in place. I walked over to the table and leaned down, placing both hands flat on the wood, looking directly into my brother's terrified eyes. For 30 years, I said slowly, you took everything I had. My homework in elementary school. My savings in high school. My peace of mind in college. You took it because you believed you were born special, and I was born to serve you. I straightened my back and looked at my parents. And you too enabled him every single step of the way. Ethan. My father started, his voice cracking, the arrogance completely stripped away. We're your parents. 10 years ago, I interrupted, when Julian abandoned his daughter and left you facing ruin, you slapped my face, put a knife to my throat in all but name, and forced me into a marriage to save your business. I saved it. I pulled a second document from my tablet on the side table and slid it to my father. Over the last decade, Vance Capital has quietly subsidized 74% of your auto parts distribution contracts. The house you live in, the mortgage, was restructured through my private holding company. The luxury cars you drive, leased under my corporate accounts. My mother put her hands over her mouth, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. I didn't do it out of love, I said, looking at them without a shred of pity. I did it out of duty. To close the ledger. To ensure that nobody could ever say Ethan owed his family a single red cent. I tapped the table. As of 8 a.m. this morning, all Vance Capital subsidies to your firm have been terminated. The lease agreements on your vehicles have been revoked. The commercial loans on your warehouse have been called in. You have 30 days to settle the balances. Ethan, you can't do this, my father cried, his hands shaking violently as he reached for my sleeve. We'll go bankrupt. We'll lose the house. We're your family. I stepped back, letting his hand fall into empty air. Julian is your family, I replied coldly. You told me that yourself 10 years ago. Now, let Julian save you. Julian was hyperventilating. The reality of his situation was finally crashing down through the thick fog of his narcissism. Audrey. Julian pleaded, his voice cracking as he turned to her like a cornered dog. Audrey, please. Think of Lily. I'm her father. You can't let him do this to her real family. If you take me to court, the judge will grant me visitation. I have rights. Audrey stood up. She smoothed the front of her tailored black blazer and looked down at Julian with absolute disgust. You have no rights, Julian, Audrey said softly. When you faked your death 10 years ago, you signed a death certificate application that your parents filed to claim a life insurance policy, which, by the way, is another felony we haven't even brought to the DA yet. Julian's knees went weak. Furthermore, Audrey continued, 8 years ago, Ethan and I legally finalized a second-parent adoption. Ethan's name is on Lily's birth certificate. In the eyes of the law, the state of New York, and God Almighty, Ethan is her father. You are nothing more than an anonymous biological donor with a criminal record. She picked up her folder and turned toward the door. 2 detectives from the Manhattan District Attorney's Financial Crimes Bureau are waiting downstairs in Lobby B, Audrey added over her shoulder. They have questions regarding the Singapore wire frauds. If you leave right now, Marcus will escort you out the service elevator so you don't make another scene on the street. No, 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 no. Julian dropped to his knees, grabbing at the edge of the conference table. Ethan. Mom. Help me. Ethan, I'm your brother. I looked down at the boy who had cast a shadow over the first 20 years of my life. In that moment, I felt no hatred. I felt no burning desire for revenge. I only felt an overwhelming, profound sense of emptiness, the kind you feel when you finally throw away an old, broken toy that you spent years crying over as a child. Get out of my office, Julian, I said quietly. Marcus and 3 security officers entered the room. Without a word, they lifted Julian from the floor and dragged him toward the private exit. My mother followed, sobbing uncontrollably, while my father stumbled behind them like a ghost, his shoulders hunched, his age finally catching up to him all at once. The heavy doors clicked shut. Silence returned to the boardroom. Saturday afternoon arrived with the crisp, clean warmth of early autumn. The private screening room in downtown Manhattan was completely empty except for 3 people. Lily was sitting between Audrey and me, a giant tub of buttered popcorn resting on her lap, her eyes glued to the animated movie on the giant screen. Every few minutes, she would lean over to hand me a piece of candy or whisper an excited commentary about the cartoon characters on screen. I watched her profile in the glowing light of the projector. Her laughter was pure, untainted by the storm that had raged through the city over the past 48 hours. The tabloids had been silenced, the legal filing sealed, and Julian was currently sitting in a holding cell awaiting a bail hearing his parents couldn't afford to pay. When the movie ended and the credits rolled, Lily stretched her arms, yawning happily. That was the best movie ever, she declared, wiping a trace of butter from her cheek. Better than the superhero one last month? I teased, unbuckling her coat. Much better, she said with absolute certainty. We walked out into the private lobby of the theater. Audrey went to the restroom to freshen up, leaving Lily and me sitting on the velvet bench by the glass windows overlooking Broadway. Lily swung her legs back and forth, staring at her shiny sneakers. Daddy? She asked quietly. Yes, sweetheart. Who was that man at the party on Thursday? My heart skipped a fraction of a beat. I kept my face gentle, leaning down slightly to meet her eyes. Why do you ask? I heard the guards talking in the hallway yesterday, Lily mumbled, twisting the strap of her small purse. They said he was shouting that he was my Real dad. I took a slow breath. I had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my head over the last decade, wondering how I would explain the truth when she was old enough to understand. Lily, I began softly, taking her small hands in mine. Biology means someone gave you your eyes or the shape of your nose. But being a father means being the one who holds you when you have a nightmare, the one who teaches you how to ride a bike, and the one who loves you more than anything in the world, every single day. Lily looked at me with her sharp, intelligent dark eyes, eyes that were so remarkably like Audrey's. Then, she smiled. I know that, Daddy, she said matter-of-factly. That man was weird and messy. You smell like cedarwood and coffee. And he didn't even know I'm allergic to peanuts. A lump rose in my throat. I pulled her into a tight hug, burying my face in her soft hair. I love you, Lily, I whispered. I love you too, Daddy, she replied, patting my back with her small hand. Now. Can we get hot chocolate? Double marshmallows, I promised. When Audrey walked out of the corridor, she stopped a few feet away, watching the 2 of us with a soft, rare expression on her face. We walked out onto the street, where the evening breeze carried the scent of roasted chestnuts and falling leaves. Marcus had the Maybach waiting at the curb. Lily hopped into the back seat, eagerly pulling out her sketchbook. Audrey stood by the open passenger door, looking at me. The city light sparkled in her dark eyes, reflecting the vibrant pulse of the metropolis we had conquered together. The board approved the final expansion of the logistics network this afternoon, Audrey said softly. You now control 52% of the voting shares in the tech subsidiary. I looked at her, the woman who had offered me an empire 10 years ago when I had Nothing but a fruit knife and my own stubborn pride. And what about the golden couple of New York? I asked, a faint smile touching my lips. What does the CEO think of our mutual leverage now? Audrey reached out, her slender fingers sliding up the lapel of my coat, resting gently against my chest, right over my heartbeat. 10 years ago, it was leverage, Ethan, she said, her voice rich with an emotion she no longer bothered to hide. Today, it's just my life. And I have no intention of ever letting you go. I wrapped my arm around her waist, pulling her close against the cool autumn air, and kissed her, not for the cameras, not for the board, but for ourselves. Behind us, in the warm glow of the car window, our daughter tapped on the glass, holding up a drawing of 3 figures holding hands under a bright, golden sun. The shadow of the past was gone. The stand-in was no longer standing in anyone's place. I was home.